Hey everyone, we're just going to give people another minute or two to log in here, so sit tight and we'll get started shortly. All right. I think we should get going. What do you think?
I think
Let's
so.
do this. All right. Well, first of all, want to welcome you all to our session today and wish you all a very happy Black History Month, however you are celebrating. Or maybe today is part of your celebration, and we're excited to share this session with you. My name is Louisa Benedicto. I will not be involved in the session today, but I did want to jump on and introduce you to our speakers. In a moment, they will give you their full background, but if I might introduce them by saying I'm really excited to have them share their expertise with you all today. So you will be joined by Jason Motley, who is our Senior Learning and Development Business Partner, but more importantly is one of the co-leads of the Black Excellence Network here at Hayes across the Americas. And this is the first time that one of our ERGs is doing an event. So we're really excited to have Jason's expertise. And my colleague, Peter Hall, who works for Fairer Consulting, which is the diversity, equity and inclusion consulting firm that Hayes started working with last year. We purchased. You may have seen us on some previous events. We were previously known as Vasida, and we've just gone through a little rebrand. So we're now called Fairer. But I'll let them give you more introduction about themselves. To me, this is a really important session because the way that I try and celebrate Black History Month is by educating myself. I would call Jason Motley one of my mentors. He is very kind to share lots of information with me, never too much information with me about the inequities that have existed and still do exist. And I'm really excited for the two of them to share their level of expertise with you all today. So without further ado, I will get off camera, I will sit back and I will enjoy an informative session and celebration with you both. Over to you, Jason and Peter.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa, for that introduction. Too kind is what I'll say. Before I go in and introduce myself and allow Peter the opportunity to introduce himself, I just want to let everyone know that we are recording this session, and we do that to encourage you to maybe not rely solely on your notes or your memory, but to be able to share this with your colleagues as well and your networks outside of just anyone who can make this call. But with that said, I am Jason Motley, and I'm very thrilled. You will, I won't have to say this. You'll see it as Peter and I move into the conversations. But you'll see that this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. My position as a learning and development professional, I also have a passion for not just for speaking, but for training and educating and helping people grow. So this is a great opportunity for me. And I'm equally as humbled to have Peter Hall with me, and he's too great of an individual for me to butcher his introduction. So I'll hand it over to him to introduce himself to the group.
Okay, thanks for that, Jason. Much appreciated. Welcome, everybody. My name is Peter McDonald-Hall, consultant at Fairer Consulting, the global inclusion company. I've been in this space for quite a while, man and boy, for just over 20 years now in the DEI space, and my background is quite diverse. I've worked across many sectors, public and private sector. And one of my formal roles, I was a director for diversity, equity and inclusion in an asset management recruitment firm before moving and joining Fairer Consulting. So I do come at this. Equally so, like Jason, one of my achievements was actually setting up the the civil service here in the UK, Civil Service Race Equality Network, CISRN. I was one of those co-founders there here in the UK. So my background goes far and wide when we talk about race equity and race inclusion. I'm passionate, very passionate about ensuring and helping organisations create truly inclusive workspaces and cultures. And so I'm very much playing to that dynamic, supporting C-suite, mid-tier managers, as well as wider staff engagement for a lot of our organisations. But I'm going to leave it there because I'm really keen to have the discussion with Jason about actually, as we mark Black History Month, it's quite a great opportunity to find out the nuances of how this plays out, both from a US perspective, but also from a UK European perspective as well. So hopefully we can bring both of those aspects to bear during this session.
Love it. So, so together, we bring not just passion, but a wealth of knowledge for addressing the complexities of race and social justice. And what we're really here to do is to guide you through today's discussion and encourage a robust exchange of ideas. So what I do encourage everyone to do is we do have the chat open. If you have questions, if you have shared experiences, if you have any comments that you want to add, by all means, please do that. We did also start the call up with a poll about your level of comfort discussing race in the workplace. If you can just, it's anonymous, right? But if you can just kind of answer that poll, it'll help us kind of gauge the conversation and weave that into today's conversations. My colleague O'Neill just went in and re-brought that to the top of your screens. And while you guys are filling out that quick poll, what I like to do is just take a quick second and be intentional to set the stage, if you will. So the overall intention for this webinar is to educate and perhaps even change some of the ways that we think and recognize, especially within this topic, that this isn't one of those. This is one of those easier said than done type of conversations, right? And mindset. So what I'd like for us to do is to get our state of mind in a position where we'll be able to get the most out of this call. And the way to do this is to first, please always assume positive intent. Peter and I are here with noble intentions and the goal of educating and shifting perspectives, not at all to make anyone feel bad or attacked or anything of the sort. This, however, does not mean that there won't be parts of these conversations that won't make you feel challenged or perhaps even uncomfortable. And if you do find yourself in those situations, right, in those feelings, I encourage you to please embrace those feelings. I often like to say that knowledge is in the struggle, and like so many other things in life, if you're lifting weights in the gym or training for a 5K, learning a new language, if it comes to you too easily, it's probably not working and you're not growing. So please be honest, be open with yourself, be open to truths and experiences that may differ from what you've been led to believe. Be honest with yourself about some of the experiences you've had or the decisions that you've made, and the things that you've said or heard, being introspective of your intention. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to challenge, things that we present. Whether that's something that Peter or myself say, or a question, or even if it's just you challenging the way that you think. That is, when growth and learning really happens. And the last thing that I'll say is that this isn't Vegas. So whatever you hear here, whatever you uncover or you discover, I encourage you, please share that with your networks, share that with your teams. Find ways of taking some of the things that we talk about here and turning them into action items. So with that said, what we're going to do now is what is it that we're here to talk about? What are we going to be discussing today? The first part that we'll talk about is why are we celebrating Black History Month? So we'll begin by highlighting some significance of Black History Month. We'll emphasize the importance of reflection on our shared history and the ongoing journey, and this is the key part, towards racial equity, equality, and justice. We'll also introduce the concepts of race, racial prejudice, racial privileges, providing definitions and examples to help facilitate the understanding, while we'll also discuss the historical context of these concepts and the relevance in today's society. We'll also work towards explaining some things around micro-inequalities. How are they manifested in professional environments, the effects that they have on Black employees. We'll share some real-world scenarios to, again, bring everything to life. And then we'll also back it up with some research findings that illustrate the impact. And then we'll start to close off the session around having this shift between going from colorblind to color brave, addressing some of the limitations of a colorblind approach that perhaps ignores racial differences and the need for a more color brave approach that confronts and addresses these racial issues head on. And so again, that section of today's call will really be one where we're going to encourage you to embrace the discomfort and use that discomfort as a catalyst for growth and to actively participate in creating more inclusive spaces. So ideally, by the end of this hour, you should feel a bit more empowered to continue to learn, to continue the conversation with your organizations, to reflect, and even maybe reconnect with us as Peter and I are both very determined to help you in your company's transformation. So hopefully everyone's excited. You're going to have to stay the whole part. But what we're going to start with is just learning a little bit about Black history. And what I can start with is Black history is almost inextricable from American history. For far too long, Black history has been treated as an addendum or a footnote, if you will, in the American narrative. But the reality is that in every sector of the US and Canadian life, whether it's the arts or sciences or literature, sports, philosophy, politics, the military, medicine, Black people in the Black community, Black culture have been essential and fundamental to the growth, development, and the success in our countries. And so that is one of the reasons why we have really gone out and pushed and believe that Black history should be celebrated because of historic silences, we'll say. And then a little history. It didn't always start as a month. Right. So right now, we understand that the month of February is dedicated to celebrating Black excellence and recognizing the profound impact of Black culture. But the other half of that coin that I find is equally important, in addition to the contributions of Black thinkers and scientists and authors and political leaders, is that there's still work to be done. And so when we look at the history, it started as just one day in 1987, the observance of Frederick Douglass on February 14th. And then a little bit more importance was given to the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. And then in 1926, it turned from a day celebration to a week celebration. And because of Lincoln's birthday being on February 12th, and again, Frederick Douglass' birthday observance being on February 14th, that just made sense to make it in that week. And then in 1976, President Ford said, you know what, let's make this a month. And that's why the month of February began. Or the month of February is when we find Black History Month. And though it started in the States, Peter will help explain how it's kind of resonated and rippled through the rest of the world.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. And yeah, and as Jason has quite eloquently put, Black History Month certainly has its roots and its foundation in the US for all the reasons that Jason's outlined. But that's certainly grown. So over here in Europe, and particularly here in the UK was one of the first countries in Europe to adopt Black History Month, and we mark Black History Month interestingly in October and not February. Now, depending where you source out your information, there's a variety of ways in which why that happens. And there's everything from it aligns better to in students where during education, and October was the month where actually it was felt they were better engaged with the month and support the month from an educational standpoint. And yet I've seen other aspects in terms of where they say African leaders, again, when they convene and come together, it was October. So depending on your sources, you're going to get a differentiating way it's marked. But more importantly, it is marked. And here in the UK, that started in London in 1987 in terms of marking a month and that resonance to recognise the contributions of people from the Black communities, diverse Black communities there. Interestingly, in Germany, Germany was the second country to mark Black History Month, and they did so starting from 1990, with Ireland joining in 2010. So you can very much see we're on a journey here in terms of marking this particular occasion. It's not yet global, and no doubt it will continue to grow in its growth. And it's also marked in the Netherlands, but interestingly, in the Netherlands, it's known as Black Achievement Month. So interesting to even it's marked globally, the way it's marked locally in different regions does differ. But the good thing about that is it is about marking the value contributions of the diverse Black communities that are within the particular country regions. And it's actually about drawing a line in terms of identifying we're on a journey. Yes, it's about looking back from a historical context, but it's also about looking forward as well. It's about looking forward in terms of understanding and recognizing what can we do, particularly within the workplace, to create more race equitable, more race inclusive workplaces as we move forward, because we are on a journey. I wish I could say, and Jason and I were having a conversation earlier about this in terms of tick that box, already done, good, all good. Jobs are good one, yeah? I'm afraid it's not that easy. And whilst we do mark the occasion and celebrate success historical, we are moving forward. We've still got hurdles to overcome, and no doubt Jason will tell you more about that. But it's useful to learn and share with you the history of Black History Month and its relevance. There are some that say, for example, do we need a Black History Month? Why have they got Black History Month? We don't have a White History Month, do we? No, because we learn about history, it's every day. And hopefully we will move to a position whereby when we no longer need this, but at the moment we do need to shine the lens and actually value the contributions from all our diverse communities as we go forward. Jason, anything you want to say to that in terms of to celebrate our accomplishments or anything?
No, I think we hit it, right? So it's acknowledging, right, and celebrating what's been done while still recognizing that there is work to be done, as Peter said, that we're still on the journey towards understanding the inequities and then mitigating them, fixing them, right, to the point where, yes, in that future state, we do have, the world that we envision and the world that we want.
Okay, great, thank you. As we move forward, one of the key barriers as we engage with a diverse array of stakeholders and employers is around how comfortable employees feel talking about race and racism in the workplace. So it's really interesting, and thank you for taking the time to complete this poll. I have to say, somewhat unusually, you're quite a positive bunch. So I think we're talking to the color brave people at the moment, because the vast majority of you sometimes feels uncomfortable, but most of you feel actually talking about racism is like talking about any other. And actually, I'm glad we're winning. But I'm also said, if I was to take that litmus test and I was to go out in the workforce in the diverse areas that you are from, I might get a different picture. But this is quite positive and that. But I want to find out a little bit more about some of the things that prevents people from feeling confident and competent talking about race. So when I play into this 33% and others, very, particularly that 10%, very uncomfortable as such. Some of the feedback I tend to hear in terms of what makes people feel uncomfortable is that they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. Yeah, language is always changing. What's the right thing to say at the moment? We don't want to inadvertently offend anyone as such. And typically when I ask people for examples of what's wrong, I don't get a lot back. What's playing back tends to be either examples they've seen on the news, social media, where individuals may have expressed something and got it completely wrong. And nobody wants to be a social media feed, do they? Nobody wants to be kind of displayed in that way. So that can make people fearful of getting it wrong, and in terms of not being confident. And I'm going to say something quite a little bit challenging to that. I'm going to say we need to be brave. We need to be brave of our convictions. If you're going to talk about race, and I think we need to be kind of two things. We need to be afraid of not getting it wrong. Okay, we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I'll say that again. We need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is talking about race for some is like very unusual, because they may not have diverse networks, personal or professional. They just don't have the opportunity to talk about these issues. Where for others, they have very diverse circles. And so talking about this topic is easier, absolutely easy, because you can, dare I say, there might be even an age demographic about that. Younger workers tend to have quite diverse groups, and that allows them the opportunity to engage in topics of this nature. As we get older, and I count myself a little bit of a baby boomer Gen X person, the grey is real, okay, it's about, we get a bit kind of, well, we don't like too much difference. We like similarity, or we like sameness around it. We kind of like that comfort, but that can limit the interaction or the opportunities to have really informed discussions about race and racism. And so when we are talking about this topic, by learning to be uncomfortable talking about it, but still pushing through and talking about it is absolutely key. Okay, I will know where you're coming from as a place of authenticity. So if I share something about my background, is this. So my background is West Indian. My mother was from St. Lucia. My father was from Barbados. And so very much from that kind of background, talking about race and racism is very key. But I also have half brothers as well. And my stepmother's white Irish. Oh, didn't know that about me, did you now? Okay. Oh, now just me sharing that may change the lens of how you're viewing me or how you listen to me. So when we talk about this, when we share aspects about ourselves, it can make it sometimes very often easier for the other person to share some aspect about themselves. Okay, context is key. You have the perfect platform in Black History Month to now share and encourage people to share their insights, their stories. It's kind of weird if you're coming at a financial meeting to do so and it doesn't quite work. So let's be uncomfortable, learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable as we move forward, but words do matter. So I'm going to hand it over to Jason to take us forward.
Yeah, Peter, and you had alluded to this and said, some of this, the language that we use and the words that we use. So words and language, they can help, they can hurt, they can uplift, they can inspire. But it's not just the words that we use, but it's also how we accept the language that we hear. There's something called linguistic subordination. And at some point, I'm going to venture to say that you've heard the phrase standard American English or proper English, correct English, because the association of correctness, right, this idea that there's one single correct way to use the English language has emerged, right? And this is what leads to what's called the linguistic subordination. So this happens when, a socially prestigious group, right, or a majority of the population is considered superior to those than the stigmatized groups. So in the U.S. and in Canada, Blacks have long been stigmatized because of the way that they use language, whether it's how they pronounce a word or how they construct sentences or phrases that are used. And this form of discrimination is a way to delegitimize the speakers who do not conform to a particular English usage norm. And these impacts are more than just superficial. They could very well appear in the form of employment and promotions or lack thereof, applying and receiving loans, and even interactions with authority. So what I challenge you to do is the next time that you hear something or it almost crashes with your ears, what negative associations do you harbor against these non-standard English usage? And then another layer of that question is, where do these associations come from? So the first step is acknowledging your personal bias or even unconscious bias, and then interrogating the source is going to be the first step to overcoming them. And so, right, that's that first piece that we want to talk about. And then the other piece is that language is constantly changing throughout the years. The way that we categorize ourselves went from people of color to African American to Black. The way that we described slaves is now enslaved people, because the term slave still, after all these years, dehumanizes the individual. There's now this term that's used, the global ethnic majority, which I'll allow Peter to explain.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Just very quickly on that. Yeah, language is always changing, in terms, and that can be sometimes as a hurdle. And as I said before, when we have diverse groups, we can talk about that. The term global ethnic majority is quite a new one, and actually it's one that's adopted by Hayes. And what that is, that's about recognizing that globally, when we talk about ethnic communities, in the UK, we have the term ethnic minority because ethnic minority communities are minority here, of course. But globally, diverse groups, ethnic groups are the majority. So we're seeing this global ethnic majority. And this term is definitely on the increase and being used, particularly for organizations and firms and businesses that are global in their context. Usually when they're reporting on the representation of their workforce, very much they're now playing into using this term, the global ethnic majority. And actually, we know globally that when we look at diverse groups, ethnic groups, it's on the rise. You know, you'll be familiar with in the US, the rise of minority groups, which I think are lauded to be in the majority in a not too distant future. And already here in the UK, we have certain cities here within the UK that already have an ethnic majority population over the indigenous population. And so we're seeing the rise. And this language is just about just representing, if you like, the future in terms of the representation of global majority groups, global ethnic groups, sorry.
And so with all this said, the shortcut, if you will, is to just make it easy, right? Refer to the individual by their name, not their race. When you're in these, in these social opportunities, mirror and match the language that's being used by that individual. And like Peter said earlier on, if you're not sure, ask, right? As long as it's coming from a place of caring and a place of, inquiring for insight, you really can't go wrong.
Okay. Jason, just before you close off on that, I just want to give a caveat around mirror and match the language used by an individual. Be careful, especially if you're younger people, yeah, because you've got diverse groups. And so when you mix socially, the language can get a bit more fluid and a bit more nuanced as such. Be mindful of not carrying references to that in the workplace. So the N-word, if I use certain musical genres, some of that language can seep into social circles, fine, because you know each other quite well and you may be super comfortable using that. Be mindful of bringing that language into the workplace because you could inadvertently cause offense to people who may not understand the meaning of that kind of place. So do mirror and match, but with the caveat, be mindful certain terms won't work in the modern workplace.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. So just quickly here, I thought this was Jason and I thought it was really super useful to kind of look around definition around race and race and equity. What do we mean by it? Now there are many definitions around race playing out there, but this is one that we particularly use at FAIRA. I'm just going to read it and I'm going to give a personal account to it. I wish I could say I don't like it. I don't really like it. I don't agree with it, but I can see how it can play out, particularly from my lived experience as such. Let's just read it out. Race as we know today should be seen as a social and historical construct formed by power structures for the purpose of subjugating, ruling, and having one social group having control over another. As a construct, the myth of essential racial differences must be told and retold through social and political power structures. Without so, the myth of race breaks down. So when I look at this from an historical construct, just to share personal insight, my grandfather, I know I don't look old enough, fought in the First World War. Okay, that was the story that my mum told me on my grandfather's side and things. So Pete, know where you come from, know your history, etc. Really kind of used to motivate you, be more, do more. So she told me about my grandfather fighting in the First World War, and I was very young. She told me, and in short, I went to my history teacher at school at the time, Mr. Turner, and I went, sir, my mum keeps going on about how my granddad fought in the First World War. Now we're learning about the First World War, Maginot Line from a European, Franz Ferdinand assassination and all that kind of stuff. But nowhere in our books is it seen anything about Black West Indians fighting in the First World War, right? So is she right? Now I fully was expecting him to say, sorry, Pete, your mum's wrong. She's embellishing the truth like that. But he didn't. He goes, she's right. It floored me. And like that, I went, well, hold on. If it's right and it's true and it's a fact, why aren't we learning about that? And he said, because you won't find it in the syllabus. It's not that we're teaching that. If you want to find out more, you need to go to a black bookshop to find out more. Now, at the time, I lived in Brixton, South London, very diverse community, and I found a black bookshop. I even went to the local library to find information, nothing. So when I went to this black bookshop, there it was. The British West Indian Regiment, made up of volunteers from a variety of West Indian islands who fought for king and country. And my granddad was one of them. He did so well to the fact that actually he was given a parcel of land in St. Lucia, which we have to today, to mark his efforts. But I was torn. And the reason I was torn like this, when my friends were talking about their dads and their granddads fighting in the war, I never really felt authentic that I could do so. Even though it's factually true, there wasn't any evidence that we were learning about it. It wasn't. And my key question, why was it hidden? If it's a fact, why was it hidden? Of course, today in 2024, you can find reams of information about the British West Indian Regiment. And I'm sure some of you may be even Googling it now. Okay. But it's out there. But when I was younger, and it shows how old I am, it wasn't around. And that impacted how authentic I could be about myself. It impacted how I could tell my story. It muted my voice. So when I look at this construction around race, although I want to disagree with it, from my personal insight, it absolutely kind of resonates. But this aspect about storytelling, as a construct, the myth of essential racial differences must be told and retold through social and political power structures. Without so, the myth of race lives on. It's quite interesting, actually, when I look at from a media perspective, a social perspective, here in the UK, our adverts on television has changed quite dramatically. I remember growing up, if there was a black person on TV, and it's usually late at night, we went, yay, and everybody rushed to the TV, okay? Fast forward to now, today, they're everywhere. It almost feels unauthentic because it's just everywhere. If you see the average family here in the UK, you would believe that they're a diverse family there. But it's good because actually what that's doing is actually the messaging saying you can be anywhere, you can be represented at any level as such. And so talking about it, showing people the fact of who they are, different circumstances, different position is absolutely key. And it's about seeing people for people and not trying to control the narrative around their racial background. Such. And I suppose on reflection, as you read this descriptor, do you agree with it or do you disagree with that? Just as kind of a reach to reflect on.
Pete, thanks for sharing that that anecdote about your experience and your grandfather's involvement and how that was missing from your own education, and that is, I think, very reflective of the reason why we have Black History Month, because for so many years, if not for these types of efforts, those true stories would have gone unheard and then read and integrated into history. So that's a great anecdote of your personal experience, as well as one of the reasons why we have an emphasis on Black History Month. And then to kind of expand a little bit more on what you were saying about the definition of racism, I believe that we each may have a different definition or perspective of or understanding of what racism is. And I think this slide really illustrates the impact or the proportionality of the effect of different types of racism. And I think the one that we always go to is the overt racism, right? That's the hate speech, the violence, right? Different organizations that are solely about hate, right? But if you could, Pete, can you elaborate a little bit more on the three different types of racism, and then how they have a much larger impact than perhaps we think?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason. And as you said, the overt racism, what we see, kind of the hate crime, the obvious, you can see it coming a million miles because it's based on race, the differentiated race. Even for women, sometimes the way Black women wear their hair in professional circles, that's discriminatory, very overt, very clear. In a modern workplace, the one out of these three types, the unconscious race bias is the one we're more likely to come across. It's whereby we think something's going on, but we're not quite sure. It's not so overt. And so when we look at the patterns in terms of hiring, when we look at socialization, etc., what we tend to see when we see that information, we see data and trends. And so when organizations talk about, for example, they want to be more representative either of the talent pool or of their customer base or client base, etc. Okay, what am I doing? Well, I'm running to your website and I'm looking at the data and the analytics. And if I'm not seeing me in terms of your representation at senior levels, I might start to question, how authentic are you in your aspirations to be truly diverse or increase the diversity of your workforce? Because you're not doing it purely about skin color. When I think about the intersectionality of who we are and what we bring, It's about being black, female, male, certain age, sexual orientation, you don't know have a disability, faith, religion, belief, etc., whatever it may be. But it's about bringing my whole self and how can I add value to you as an organization. And there's lots of research, if we look from McKinsey, that definitely highlights having a diverse and an inclusive organization where you have females and diverse, black representation makes you more profitable. But the one that we're looking at in terms of real impact is around institutional systemic racism. And so we've got a definition here from Sir William Macpherson. And this comes about here in the UK when Sir William Macpherson was investigating the Metropolitan Police who were investigating the untimely death of Stephen Lawrence here in the UK. Stephen died in 1996, not dissimilar to George Floyd many years later in the US in 2020. And Stephen was killed at a bus stop. But the Met Police were found to be institutionally racist. And what do I mean by that? It doesn't mean to say every officer is racist. Okay, it's not about individual, but it does say actually the processes and the attitudes of the behavior of officers were found wanting. They were giving a different service, different to that of the majority group. And as a result, that led to differential way that they led in terms of investigating Stephen Lawrence here. And his mother, Doreen Lawrence, who's made the Baroness of Clarendon, okay, is definitely recognised as a fighter for justice very much. Stephen wanted to be, I believe, a surveyor and that, and there's kind of tributes to that, and that's recognised very much so. But when we look at institutions like systemic racism, that has a huge impact because that's not about individual, that's about organisational. That's about keeping down pay gap information. That's about not having that diverse representation at top tiers of organisations, because fundamentally, if I can't see it, can it be done? I can't believe it. I need to see it to feel it can be done. And that's the importance of role models. So when we talk about these types of racism and the impact that they can have for progressing race-inclusive organisations, the institutionalized racism definitely has the biggest marker, unconscious race bias, and the overt racism. Although it feels big in its opinion, actually, because it's done by individuals, is much less impact.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Peter. And if I could just reemphasize, right, that unconscious bias piece is it maybe one of the ones that takes the most introspective and honest reflection, because these are the things that we do that either we don't notice we do, or we just feel that it's instinctual, right? Whether it's something a little bit obvious, like when you're walking down the street, right, and you see someone walking towards you, do you tense up a bit? Do you hold your purse? Do you look back as they're passing, right? And what's your reason for doing that? And would you have had that same reaction if the individual were different? That unconscious bias, as we're looking at a resume, are we dismissing them because of the complexity of their name? If we had a negative experience with one individual, are we replicating that feeling with entire groups of that race, right? And then the systemic racism, this is the one that has a huge impact on entire communities that we almost feel like we don't have power over because they're embedded in our systems, right? So a little homework for those of you who are inclined to it, maybe looking into the origins of the prison system, looking into redlining, right, and housing for minorities and things of that nature. And so, if we look at how these countries were built, they were built in a time when Black people weren't considered people; they were considered property. And so you have this system that was built by a majority for the majority, not even thinking about minorities, right? And it's unrealistic to think that with the flip of a switch, with the Emancipation Proclamation, with the 13th Amendment, that everything flips over, right? And the system that was built continues to be built and amended to keep that majority in power. And these topics we'll see resonate in the next about 20 minutes as we start to talk about some other things that are all impacted by this history that we have.
Yeah. And Thanks for that, Jason. And I think it's just kind of playing into that a little bit more about our attitudes and behaviour, particularly as such a pivotal point when we talk about systemic racism as such. So as you read this this quote here about attitudes as a feeling and belief, if we can just release the next one. I want to play into this ABC model around attitudes, behaviours and cognitive aspects around affecting our thought process as we go forward. Okay. Jason, is there a bottom part of that? Yay!
There sure is.
Right. Okay. Yay. Okay. Cool. So Jason really gave a really key example around kind of you know, a black youth on the way home, and how do you view them as such. So you know, just listen to me. Just play a little story with me. Here's a narrative. Okay, we're listening to the evening news, and so we're hearing in our news reports, social media reports, whatever medium you choose to take your news from, that young black men are attacking other black men in increasing numbers. Okay, so we're hearing this narrative. We don't have a diverse group to sense check that, but we're hearing this information. So that's feeding our cognitive information and how we act. This is where it gets really interesting. So you're working late at the office one night, and on the way home to the subway station, as such, you recognize a young black man in a hoodie walking towards you. Okay, and so as this young black man is walking towards you, what's your attitude? How do you feel? Now, there's two modes of thought here. One could be you're used to mixing with diverse groups, and so seeing a young black man walk towards you, he's like, well, nothing going on here, Pete. It's a young black man going where he's going, okay? And I'm moving on. However, what if you're not using to diverse and actually you're influencing, and this message is going on in your head, young black men attacking other black men? Okay, I may need to be careful. Could be dangerous. I'm on my own. So you could clutch your handbag if you've got a handbag and you're walking, or your case or whatever you're carrying. So you might clutch it and actually go past. Or you could cross the road as such and able to say, I want to be safe in that regard. But it's interesting how that messaging has affected your behavior and affected your attitude and impacted on your behavior. Okay. And it's about recognizing how our attitudes drive our behaviors in situations, how we view certain groups, maybe differentially. It could be, for an example, you've got two colleagues, white man, black man. Black man is quite expressive, quite vocal. Oh, he's a bit loud. He's a bit boisterous. White man, oh, he's a bit confident. He can articulate his cause. We can judge things differently based on our association, our picture, our labeling. All of these things can affect how we view individuals and groups. So we need to be mindful about how the messaging you receive may impact on our attitude and how we see different groups, and actually may affect our behaviors in that case. Okay, can you have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this can lead to, if we're not mindful, to small acts of behavior, microaggressions, as they're called. Micro-inequities is another word. I'm going to let you read this quote from Yolanda Flores, because actually sometimes we experience things and we can't put a label to it. So what is a microaggression, Pete? And you know, and it's when you may feel insulted or slighted. And how did you feel? So I'm playing to how you felt. And there's essentially three types. The first one is a micro assault. In fact, it could be quite macro, actually. You know, it's very obvious and it hurts. So it's telling a racial joke where they're using your difference to tell a joke. But you know, the worst thing is you're laughing along because you want to see that you fit in, but inwardly it's hurting within you. So the micro assault really hurts, but it's really obvious. It's overt. The other aspect is a micro insult. Now, I'm going to be honest. I did this myself, okay? And I give an example. A colleague of mine gave a fantastic presentation to a senior level board. And my feedback to them was like, wow, you're really good. You were really clear, really articulate. And they came back to me and said, Pete, why did you say that? I thought, well, why did I say that? You know, it's like, boom, off the cuff. Well, my friend in question is named Kwame. Kwame is Nigerian, okay? Kwame and I grew up in similar areas, South London. The only difference between Kwame and myself is that he's from Nigerian heritage. I'm from West Indian heritage. And in truth, when I gave Kwame that expression, it had been said to me a number of times. And I thought, I'll take that. I like that. Okay. But I never really thought about it. Now, bear in mind that Kwame is born and raised here in the UK. So he was kind of quizzical, so Pete, why did you say I was clear and articulate? Why wouldn't I be? And what I did inadvertently, I stereotyped Kwame, because all my friends from a Nigerian background spoke with a, how can I say this politely, a certain twang. He didn't. And I was relaxed with Kwame, I was not off guard, but I was relaxed. And I kind of gave him that feedback. To be honest, I didn't even think about it. I thought about it in a macro second. My bias was kicking out. And all he said, why did you say that? That made me reflect. Because for me, I never ever did that to colleagues who were from different parts of the UK. And certain UK, so if you were from Scotland, if you were from the Southwest in Cornwall and Devon, those are areas of really strong regional dialects. Not once did I say, oh, you were really clear, because I expected it. But with Kwame, I labelled him, so I stereotyped it. So that was me overlaying that. And I learned from there, be mindful, Peter, how you do things. Sometimes things aren't always obvious, okay? And the other type of microaggression is invalidation. Not seeing that I'm a black man, not noting colorism. And the reason this is important is this. It's not because I'm black, it's about recognizing being black male of a certain age. It's part of who I am. And when you invalidate that saying, but Pete, we don't see you as one of, we just see you as Pete. You're one of the boys and stuff like that, yeah? Sounds great, doesn't it? Until you mess up. Boy, did you see color then when you mess up, when you make a mistake. All of a sudden, I'm carrying this heavy load because now I'm representative of all black men all over the world, okay? So if I mess up, the next guy who joins an organization or a firm, they're saying, well, Pete got it wrong. Is this guy going to get it wrong, right? I don't have the luxury of just being me, all right? And so that kind of can label me. So it can be really important and validate to see me for me. And I see that as a luxury. And the overall impact of this is this. It's called weathering. Pete, what's weathering? Weathering is this. When we receive a microaggression, it's a bit like acid rain. It goes drip, 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 drip. And that over a period of time, be it weeks, months, years, can affect how confident and competent we are to engage. I guarantee someone might have said a joke 10 years ago, and it might be a case of that actually you took umbrage to that. That alone will stop people from engaging in conversations like this. And that was 10 years ago. The world's moved on. But because of that one moment in time with that one individual, that has prevented them. And we need to get brave and overcome that. Jason, any thoughts?
Yeah, so it always resonates with me. We hear that, I don't see race, I don't see color, right? And your response to that is, well, then you're not seeing a part of me, right? You're not seeing, my history, my ancestors. I always like to take it just a step further, is that not only you're not seeing, a part of me and a part of my identity, and a part of my community, right? But you're also not seeing the inequities and the struggles and the injustices that we also experience. And by not seeing and by not recognizing that, we are found with more hurdles to get towards that equity and that equality that we're striving for. And I think that brings us really nicely to to the next slide and the next topic. And I know that this is a topic and this is a phrase that can be triggering and perhaps even cause some defensive or uncomfortability. And this is again one of those moments when I ask you to sit in that uncomfortability and even challenge your ways of thinking and being open to having that change in mindset. Because when we talk about white privilege, one of the things I really want to get out first and foremost is that by no means does that mean or is that indicative that life was easy for anyone, or that no one didn't have to work hard, or that their achievements weren't by merit. I think that is very often how that phrase is either interpreted or twisted. But what it means is that though you, and in this instance, we'll say the white population had to work, weren't given things, weren't fed from a silver spoon to achieve your successes. Those barriers and those challenges that you had are sometimes exponential for the Black community for many of the reasons that we spoke about before. So though, yes, you had your struggles, you had to work, some of the barriers that exist for the Black community is absent in the white community. And some of those examples we'll list on the screen, right? But again, we look at it, if we look at those three different types of racism and we think back on that systemic racism, right? There are things that were built in place to prevent certain minority groups from excelling. So when we talk about those unconscious bias and people who are resumes with ethnic sounding names are 3 times less likely to be looked at and interviewed for mirror image resumes with white sounding names. Where you can and cannot live has never been an issue unless you are a minority, in which case you are designated to red line locations. Property values, right? There are instances where, because it's a Black person living in a home with pictures of the Black family, that house is devalued. And that same house, when the pictures are changed, suddenly goes up by tens of thousands of dollars, right? Where people live, mortality rates. There's so many things that are working against a community, not always individuals, not even perpetrated by an individual onto another individual. And so that's what's meant by white privilege, right? And that's what meant by some of those systemic inequities that hold back the Black community.
Indeed. And that's really key. And I think, sorry, Jason, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to hand it over to you. And I know that, Peter, when you and I were conversing, there was a story that you had that I found very impactful.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Just a kind of insights. And when sharing my story, this definitely resonates. So, having family and friends and colleagues in the US that they have similar experiences. Just kind of really bring it for life, really. And this example about not having to educate your children on everyday racism. I mean, growing up here in the UK, my parents wanted to keep me safe. And so I had what we call the talk. And I was very young, 7 and 8. And the talk went something very briefly like, Pete, we want to keep you safe. There's some not very nice people in the world. They're going to call you some not nice names. I went, what? They're going to call you the N-word. What have I done about that? What have I done to deserve that? I was a bit gobby as a youngster. And said, you haven't done anything. Just recognize there's some people who just don't like you for nothing more than the color of your skin. But what you mustn't do, you mustn't react. I had to modify my behavior, not get angry. I went, why not? Because we want you to come home safe. We don't want anything to happen to you. And one day I was on the way from school, and I remember this car coming by, a group of looked like men to me, and they called me the N-word. Okay, they came back again and called me again. Can you believe it? Just to make sure I got in there. Now I remember pausing and reflecting, and years later, decades later, I can still remember that feeling. I can still remember getting hot, clenching my fists, but remembering those words of my parents to get home safe, mute my behavior, modify my behavior. So when I got home and I told my mum of this particular incident, she went ashen. She goes, what did you do? I said, you'd be proud of me, Mum. I didn't say anything. Okay, great. The learning is I'm lucky and blessed enough to have 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. And I did the same to them, particularly my boys. My boys are 6'5" and 6'4", and they call me a shorty at 6 foot. Okay, and I wanted to keep them safe, so I taught them the same way. Modify your behavior in certain circumstances. Even change your mode of dress if you're walking through certain areas, because the bias, people are going to perceive you and look at you a certain way. This is where the privilege plays out. If you've never been educated on everyday racism, or if you're blessed to have children, not had to educate them about everyday racism, wow, you're lucky. Okay, and that's a privilege, because you don't have to modify your behavior. You can move accordingly, and rightly so. That's the way it should be. And so for some members of our diverse communities, they are having to do this regularly. I won't say on a daily basis, but quite a lot, given the circumstances. And that's where the privilege plays out as such. It's not saying that you have everything fair, because you don't, but it's about recognizing some people move differently in the same space that we occupy and have different experiences. And it's about recognizing that.
Yeah. So hopefully you've had time to kind of read through the list and maybe some self-reflection, and maybe acknowledge some of the advantages of, no, I wear my hair like I want and I don't even think about it, or any of the examples. And then for the sake of time, we'll kind of breeze by this, but we will be sharing this slide deck with everyone after the call. After the call, we'll also include a feedback survey that we'd appreciate if you filled out. Kind of lets us know what worked, what didn't work, how did this impact you? But there are a number of studies that show the inequities, whether it's in specifically within the workplace, inequities in compensation, in bullying, in management positions, and representation. Peter, you earlier had said something. If you don't see it, you can't be it, right? So when we talk about some of the the disadvantages, representation matters. And so if I'm a young child and I'm growing up, what do I see as the norm? Do I see black Barbies and dolls? Do I see myself in movies and TV? Do I see myself or a reflection of my community in magazines and the definition of beauty? Even with makeup, what color is nude? Right? So there's so many of these things that we don't even think about, and nevertheless still have quite the impact. And the next thing that I think is highly impactful, especially because what I'd like to think is that everyone on this call is an ally. And so this quote really I find impactful. What hurts the victim most is not necessarily the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander. Pete, what's your reflection on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's more power in terms of as bystanders. We need to take action to promote inclusion. We need to ensure that we are supportive of people who may not have a voice, because sometimes the expectation is the victim has a voice and very much disempowered. So we do have a power as a bystander. So it's really about promoting allyship. How can we support race equity and race inclusion through our own lens and our own perspective?
Yeah, and then with this in mind, doing nothing is actually doing something. And even if we go back just a couple thoughts, when we think about privilege and advantages, that's another one, right? Do you have the privilege? Do you have the advantage of doing nothing, of saying nothing, and being unaffected? So we've spent this hour talking about some of the realities, right? Hopefully opening up some minds. We talked about being colorblind and how that's not as positive as some people may have thought. So now, right, we get to the end of the call, and hopefully what everyone is feeling is a sense of maybe enlightenment. Your boundaries have been pushed. The way that you thought about things has changed, and hopefully now you have a little bit of energy. And the question is, well, what do I do with that energy? How do I collectively move from being a bystander and colorblind, or maybe inactive, or maybe mute, right? And moving more into that color brave type of mentality. And so we'll leave you with a couple of strategies and actions to be an anti-racist ally. And Pete, I'll hand this over to you.
Okay, yeah, just briefly. I mean, you can reflect at this at leisure. There's things we can do individually to encourage, have more conversations. If there's a takeaway really from this session, is about go away, learn more, have conversations. Don't rely on your black colleagues to teach you. Don't do that. Be self-driven to learn more. Look at resources, find out more information, but have more information. If you're looking at this from an organizational level, are you race inclusive? Are you fit? Are you ready for that diverse talent coming into your organizations? What is it looking at the data? What does your data tell you? Where do you need to prove? What are those pinch points that you need to address? And then going forward. So, look at this. And if you've got any questions about this, feel free to come back to Jason and myself, and we're happy to talk to you in more detail about how we can support you going forward.
Definitely. So I know we're just almost at time. What I always like to do at the end of these conversations is please encourage you to use the chat. What were some of your questions that were left unanswered? What were some of your takeaways? How did this make you feel? Peter and I are active on LinkedIn, and we can take some of these questions and answer them that way. And then, as Peter said, this is a passion. This is Peter's job. If you want to continue the conversation, right? If you want to involve us in your strategy, by all means, it's what we're here to do. So you can always reach out to Peter or myself, whoever you feel had a better impact. I'm just teasing, but we really are here to. But we really are here to help the community and enterprises and companies just improve their DE&I.
Absolutely, and the key thing, in all seriousness, and I'm being deadly serious about this, in terms of we want to promote inclusive organizations, race, gender, all that, bringing it all together. And the only way we can do that is we work collectively and collaborate together to do that, to create a better future for ourselves. And so we're here to support, lean into us. You don't have to be the expert. We can take the weight off your shoulders. And so the follow-up action, as you share your feedback with us, is about, think about that, think of how we can support you. Jason and the team are absolutely magnificent and amazing. You're lucky to have them. Reach out and, you know, and be supportive going forward. And I look forward to probably hearing from you, talking to you in the near future. So from myself, take care and bye for now.
Thank you, everyone, for spending that last hour with us. I appreciate it. I hope everyone was able to take something away from it. And we are here when you need us.
Indeed.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.